Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us here on the show. Mike, maybe let's start with you. A little history on how the Nishnawbe Aski Police Force, Police Service was formed.
Well, yeah, just, I don't know how far back, but prior to Nishnawbe Aski Police Services, before 1994, the policing services was provided by the province along with the Special Constable program, and we had special constables who were working with the province, the Provincial Police Service, Ontario Provincial Police. And in 1994 is when the Nishnawbe Aski Police Service came into being, and since then we've been steadily evolving. It's been a learning process, also at the same time a very challenging process in terms of the involvement of the police service for our region.
Mike, be asking you to dig back in your mind a little here, but was there something in 1994 that led to the establishment of NAPS?
I think it was the goal of for the region, for the communities that we service. There was always a need to have our own police service, and that's when work began to incorporate a police service under the heading of what we have now, under the umbrella of Nishnawbe Aski Nation.
Police Chief Morrison, long response times have been a common issue for Indigenous communities. Has NAPS been able to help out with that?
Yes and no. When you look at the makeup of each Indigenous police service, we are underfunded. Therefore, we don't have the resources for frontline response on a 24/7 basis. So it does take time for Indigenous services to have a response to any incidences that occur in many of our communities, and we have to rely on the other police services such as the Ontario Provincial Police, which in many cases are our policing partner and respond to many critical incidences when there is shortage in personnel.
Indigenous peoples have long had issues with police, especially around allegations of racism, violence. How does NAPS work within the system to try and address that?
Well, certainly it is very challenging in today's environment. With all the social media that has captured, and documented, police officers' interaction with the public. And certainly it's necessary for the police service to work with our policing partners to ensure that we're providing that educational awareness about Indigenous culture, ensure that we're able to work with them and maybe establish partnerships and memorandums of understanding as to how we can better work together and to improve service delivery so that we're able to work with not just the Indigenous culture, but all aspects of different cultures that are making up our society today. So again, it's as a police service, an Indigenous police service, it's a responsibility of us to make sure that we're educating and forming partnerships with police services that that want to do that outreach to Indigenous people, but also again, making sure that it's not just Indigenous people, but other cultures as well.
Mike, do you think NAPS has, there been a different relationship with police since NAPS has come into effect?
For the communities?
Yeah.
Yes and no. Again, it's been the goal was to have our own people fill in the roles, be the main face to the police service. However, that's been challenging right from the beginning because of the way the organization was established and set up. Like Chief Morrison said, we did not have the resources. We were not funded accordingly. So it was very difficult, very challenging in the beginning. And like I said earlier, we've come a long ways. We've evolved and we've overcome those challenges, and that's where we're currently hoping to head into, is to promote the police service now that it's fully, well, not entirely fully, but getting to that point of being a fully funded police service.
Yeah, I'd like to get both of you on this one. With the federal government announcing more money for Indigenous policing, Mike, is that enough?
Well, I just want to point out first that for Nishnawbe Aski Police Services, we entered into these discussions way back, starting back in 2013, with the province to seek legislation under the with the province, and that those negotiations have progressed positively. We've done a lot of legwork, done a lot of work. We're at that point where we're just waiting for the province to make the proclamation to have Nishnawbe Aski Police Services fully operating under the legislation. But they do have some processes that they need to finish, so I think that's where we are in terms of waiting.
Chief Morrison, are there items that you can point to when it comes to policing where funding is definitely a glaring thing that you need?
I think if you were to ask each Indigenous police chief across Canada, I'm sure all of them will tell you that more funding is needed. When you look at core functions of police service, such as one of the core functions in the province of Ontario is for being able to provide emergency response, that funding isn't available through the First Nation Inuit policing program. When you look at having crime units to investigate major crime or even drugs, and drugs are plaguing our communities, we are not funded for specialized services. And again, when you look at a core function of a police service, you have to have the ability to provide those services. And right now, with the way the First Nation Inuit policing program is set up, those service delivery requirements for our police service, especially Indigenous policing, we're not funded for it. So again, more funding is needed. So when you look at some of the smaller services, they're basically funded for frontline delivery only. So specialized services such as emergency response, crime units, drug investigators, canine services, those are services that Indigenous services are not funded for here in Canada.
How much would those things that you just named off, how important, how often are those the calls that you'd be getting?
When you look at the violent crime and the crime severity index in Canada here, you will find a lot of Indigenous communities and police service that are providing a service to those communities. We're very high on the violent crime and the crime severity index, with many of the services ranking at the top of those indexes. So when you think about the environment Indigenous police officers are working in, it is a very trauma-filled environment because of the colonialism, the residential school impacts. So again, this has an impact on a service, and especially on the mental health of officers who are working within this environment. So again, it's very challenging. It is a very challenging environment right now.
Chief Morrison, does jurisdiction between police services play into any of those challenges?
Yes, it does. So when you look at, especially with major crimes, so such as, homicide investigation. Here in the province of Ontario, all the Indigenous services, we work with the Ontario Provincial Police. They come in and investigate these major crimes. Again, that's the way the system is set up. We don't have the capacity or the resources to investigate these major crimes. And when you look at the large policing partners such as the OPP and in other parts of Canada, the RCMP, so those larger services provide that specialized support.
Chief Morrison, if you had all the money in the world at your hands, your fingertips, so what would be some of the things that you'd move to improve right away with NAPS?
Definitely, I think not only with our service, but all the other Indigenous services, more resources, more frontline officers. Mm-hmm. We need more boots on the ground. We need additional victim support units, because there is a lot of victims that our services are dealing with. And when you think about domestic violence, sexual abuse, it is happening. You don't want to talk about it, but it is happening. It's happening at an alarming rate. and having more resources dedicated to that for investigations, for victim support, even just having housing units in our communities that police services can have as a safe place while you're making arrangements to get that victim support. You're looking at training units, you're looking at emergency response, you're looking at specialized investigation units, you're looking at traffic support. There's a wide area that each services needs to address, and with the way the funding is set up right now, it is very difficult to advance a services initiatives forward or even provide service delivery when the funding isn't appropriate for what the service or the community needs. So again, there's a lot of improvement that needs to get done for the First Nation Inuit policing program.
Indeed. Mike, no doubt that many other nations are looking to have their own police force. What advice would you give to those nations, those leaders looking to set up their own police service?
Well, just thinking back, you need the communities to be supportive, to be engaged, to be part of the process in terms of setting up a police service. I think creating awareness to our young people, to our young crowd, to make it understandable that policing can be a career now. It is a career, and it's anybody who joins the police service can go anywhere in Canada to be an officer. So those are things I would throw out there as part of as advice to people willing to enter into this.
Mike, Chief Morrison, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you taking your time to join us on the show this week.
Thank you very much.